for your dog, Bernard, not mine.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching TV Asia. This is your host, Shoaib Zaidi, and this is our weekly show, Current Affair with Dr. Bernard Malik and Professor Pitman. Yes, TV Asia brings always a talk and discussion on the current issues, and today we are going to discuss three major issues. Number one, how is the COVID situation in India and how it can be sorted out? And does anybody is doing something good from Australia and helping the community in India? And what is our responsibility being a human being to support some country like India, especially in this worst situation? And second topic will be that when the international student going to be start and what is the situation there? Because there are two mindsets for the travel ban on international student. So this is our topic of the day. Let's start with the COVID, and I would like to thank to Dr. Bernard Malik. He's our expert analyst with us as usual, and my second expert analyst is Professor Pitman. Thank you very much, sir. Professor Pitman, I'm coming to you, and my aim is like there is a survey report which shows that 70 or 71% from Australian people, they like the ban on international flight until 2022 and or maybe later. However, 29 to 30% people are in against of this decision. What is your opinion? And when I'm talking about international ban on international, it includes the people are arriving on the new permanent residency. What is your opinion, Professor Pitman, on this?
I think one of the difficulties is that Australians have accepted that we're a COVID-free country,
right?
And would prefer to keep it that way. But I see in recent times we've now got flights going to India to bring back Indian citizens from there. And I think the first couple of flights have already landed. We are keen, I think, to start getting our citizens back, even though it's taken us a little while. And Australia may be seen as a bit of an isolationist country when it comes to the COVID and opening our borders. But I see the two big airline companies in Australia have again encouraged the Australian government to open the borders.
Right.
And that we should accept some deaths as a result of it. But I don't know if that's what the Australian people would accept.
Right. Yes, that was a good news from the system that yesterday they bring 73 Australian who've been in IPL, and they went to the quarantine now, and they are spending time there now. The decision is that, okay, at one side, they started bringing back the people, which is absolutely a wonderful move, and people really appreciating this. However, on the second side, when I share the number of the survey result that the people, majority of the people is against, in favor of this travel ban. How you're looking this move, that however there is a 29 to 30% of the people, they are in favor of this one. What is your stand? Do you think that the ban will ultimately going to help, or we have to do some measures to handle this situation?
I think the biggest issue is the state governments here are not keen on having flights coming in, and they're trying to deal with the federal government over where to place people. And every time they have somebody who leaves the quarantine area and the view is that they're affecting the public, then they lock down the states. Right. And the federal government, although is somewhat supportive, is struggling to deal with how the states want it dealt with. And I know a lot of my relatives who are a bit older are keen to keep Australia COVID-free. And I've even got relatives who have never supported state government Labor premiers coming out in support of them. in recent times over travel bans as well as state bans. So there's a growing support for it and not a support for opening the borders here in Australia.
Right. Let go back to Dr. Bernard Malik. Dr. Bernard Malik, thank you very much for your time. Dr. Bernard Malik, when on the international flight, it is possible that the Australian citizens, especially from the IPL, they coming back to Australia, and it was one of the good move, which and it happened because many people like TV Asia, like Dr. Bernard Malik, like Professor Pitman, they talk about the hard comments came from the Prime Minister Scott Morrison about bringing back the players. So I say that it might be a result of a good positive response from the people like like Bernard Malik and Professor Pitman, that they say that they have to plan it and they done it. Now they landed. Dr. Bernard Malik, now the players are landed and they're already there. So that's one of the biggest achievement from the well-wisher of the Australian days are in India. How are you looking this decision, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Zaidi. I think political appetite is all that matters in terms of risk. As you know what's happening in India, I think it is fundamental duty of the Prime Minister of Australia to keep this country safe, and he has been doing a great job. Hats off to him. What happened in India would scare anybody for that matter. The way Professor Pitman said that his relatives got converted to Labour from Liberal, because everything is dependent upon how safe you want to feel here.
Dr. Bernard, do you think that the arrival of these players is possibly happen after the people and they find that the strong comments people coming from the active community members like you and many other channels like TV Asia also?
It may have contributed, but I am not sure if they would change the policy by little opposition they receive. What I feel is Prime Minister probably overshot himself by making that statement, and then he realized it was not good. They would have opened it anyway. I was surprised. Somebody came for job 2 days ago, and he had landed only a week ago from Sri Lanka. So flights from other countries are different. When we were having Eid party at your house, I met the gentleman from Barbecue tonight. And his brother came this week from Pakistan. So flights are happening. It was India that had an issue. Of course, India is also one of the biggest feeders when it comes to students. And considering we are trying to push China back a little bit, India is the next source of students. And the third source is Nepal. And situation is no different in Nepal too today. Nepal is really, really suffering bad. Australia has to make a decision as to how they want to manage this. And the decision, yes, to manage it very well. I think the critical point that you and me and Professor Pitman would agree on, federal election is next year in June.
Right.
So doesn't want to open the border and have coronavirus everywhere and get a bad name and lose election.
Right.
So no matter what's going to happen, even if the whole world is fine, they're going to be very cautious in terms of bringing Australians back until June next year.
Right. Dr. Bernard Malik, just adding to your response that you just mentioned that the flights coming from the Sri Lanka and flight coming from Pakistan, it is, and I have been part of one meeting and where they are planning to bring people from there. And there was a two different mindset. One mindset, reason for the team, the one mindset was those are already on the permanent residency and from Australia, they went there. There is a priority on them. However, that is still the people on the new permanent residency, they are not allowed to come Australia. Do you know about it? People with the new permanent residency also not allowed to enter the Australia before end of 2020.
No, not really. I saw that rule that is going around. They will be allowed. First priority is for the people who are already there and are citizens and residents. And then others will follow. See, Australia is very committed. You have to understand, Australia doesn't have many people to begin with, and they can't afford to leave too many people out. Having said that, they just want to have a very, very cautious approach to bringing people back. It has to be done in a structured manner where they can manage the quarantine. And I don't think anyone should blame them for that.
Yeah, but I'm sharing one story that yesterday when we met one of the community members, and then one of their relative was allowed, has a PR. He got the extension. You know, there is a date on that arrival in Australia. Yes. They got the extension, did not allow for after the extension also did not allow, and now they extended for 1 year. That okay, after 1 year, that okay, your visa is extended for 1 year, and then when the time will come, we will inform you and you can fly in. That is a real case. I'm talking about the permanent residency. Sharing for this one because we believe that Australia is really conscious about the international flights.
Yes, absolutely. What you're saying is true. It's happening. And as I said, they're very cautious in bringing people back. They feel their first commitment is to people who are already here. Interestingly, this gentleman who came for job interview was a new immigrant. He just got his PR and he came.
He came. Good. Dr. Malik, now coming back to the second decision, like we always discussed that international ban will going to impact on the financial institute, especially the small and medium business holders, especially where those are based on the international student. Do you think that the government has to bring something for them, or they will survive till end of the year, or what will happen with them?
I think the worst affected during this time is international institutes like ours that run.
Right. Yeah, Malik Saab, you say something?
Yeah. That run and are dependent upon international students. And because there is no new arrivals of students, we have a problem.
Right.
Having said that, we are slowly draining out of our students. We had students here. I think the last new international students were last March. And the way it looks like you won't get any more students till next year, June, or even later than that. Our sector is very, very severely affected.
Right. Okay, Mr. Malik, now I will come back to you later, and we'll discuss about the COVID in India, especially how we are going to manage and how we can support in this situation to our brothers in India. Professor Pitman, COVID in India is every day getting worse, and things are out of control, but it's still people are managing, people are supporting each other. Now, in this situation, where the numbers, you can't confirm the numbers, countries are trying to help India. And India, in the beginning, India was helping the other country. Do you think India made a mistake to take some proactive decisions?
It's always a difficult call when you've had a country that's as large in population as India.
Right.
And they in the first wave, they did pretty well, actually, considering the size of the country. And I think the government probably made an assessment that there probably wouldn't be a major second wave. So they made a decision to support other countries. I think the difficulty they've got now is it's probably gone too far for it to stop. So they're going to have to let it take its course. I certainly work with some Indian lecturers, and I'm very sad to hear that they've had relatives die in the last week, and many of their relatives are sick, and they can't get hospital beds or oxygen to help them. And I think Dr. Bernard's in a similar situation with his family. And it's very disappointing to hear that the healthcare system isn't able to look after the people there. And families are going to be broken up, disrupted. And there's going to be, I think, serious implications for India with its family connections and ultimately with industry. And I'm always very sad when I go to work and I talk to Professor Singh and I find out another one of his relatives have died, and that's very sad. And he comes from a Sikh community.
Yeah. I think it's very sad also, because most of the people, whenever you talk from to India, to anyone from the India also, everyone are almost suffering the same thing. Malik Sahab, you are very, very active on your social media. You are very active within the community. You are very actively involved on all these policy issues, and you really you really has a pain of your country people, and you talk about them, you write about them, you think about them. What exactly do you think that situation? Does the situation is going to be better next week when we're sitting again on the current affairs show on next Monday? Do you think the situation will be better?
It should be better, but unfortunately, it won't be better.
It won't be better.
Yeah. The sad part is, as Professor Pitman said, every day you talk to somebody, every day you hear from somebody who has been severely affected. When I say severely affected, I mean somebody has died of their close family or someone that they know.
Right.
Fortunately, the numbers being reported are scarcely 1% or 2%. I'll give you an example of Gujarat. Gujarat used to be the state where Prime Minister was the Chief Minister for 15 years. He took a lot of credit of branding that he came up with, saying Gujarat model of development.
Right.
They came out with the news that, I'll just give you ballpark figures.
Right.
Came out with the news that said that Gujarat government had reported only close to 3,500 cases since 1st of March to 10th of May. Cases means the deaths. So Gujarat government, I repeat, had reported only close to 3,500 deaths since March 1st to 10th of May. This newspaper went and did its own surveys, and that is meaning of they went to all the mortuaries, they went to all the graveyards, they went to all the crematoriums and found out that the real numbers that people had died during that time was 110,000. That is in one state. So number being reported are possibly 2 or 3% of real deaths, which is a very scary figure. I know if they report all the numbers, there will be riots on the street because people are desperate. You see people dying here and there because of lack of oxygen, because government has not made enough arrangements to provide people oxygen. Unfortunately, last year when coronavirus started, central government withdrew the permission, or rather, central government said producing oxygen and the license for oxygen was federal government's domain, the central government's domain. So the states could not do it.
Right.
That is why you see all these states struggling for oxygen from federal department. I am not sure what is so, secretive about it. Anybody could produce. When hospitals can produce oxygen for themselves, why can't we have more? And when I say more, means tons of new oxygen manufacturing plants everywhere, so at least people don't die. Dr. Gularia, who is the chair, or rather he is the director of AIIMS, All India Medical Institute, the most premier medical institute in the country by far, came out and said people are not dying of COVID, they're dying of lack of oxygen, which is a very, very severe statement. So COVID is not a killer, lack of oxygen is a killer, and lack of oxygen is there because government did not prepare itself for this casualty.
Professor Pitman, Dr. Bernard Malik mentioned the government not prepared for this much of casualty. You've been part of the Australian government, and you've done a lot of government assistance in different area, different region, especially when coming back to the policy matter. Do you think that in normal situation, we call it the day of the peace, the good days, does the government is really spending time and making a lot of preparation and predicting that this situation, or in the worst situation, that system will be handled and we have the enough resources, or this condition is always coming as a term of the catastrophic failure, as a bulk and panic situation?
Having been a disaster manager here in Australia, they talk about 4 principles. They talk about prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery.
Right.
The problem in governments, and it's not just India, it's around the world, is they rarely put money into prevention and preparedness.
Right.
You usually put a lot of resources into response and then resources afterwards in recovery. So it's not just India, it's most countries around the world. If India had done its planning and knowing the issues of COVID, then they would have spent more money in prevention and preparedness. And preparedness would have meant having sufficient oxygen and beds and those sorts of things readily available.
Right.
But because most governments don't put much money into it, because the dilemma is if you have hundreds of thousands of oxygen cylinders there and nothing happens, then you got all the surplus and all the money. And that's what happens with governments around the world with disaster management. It's much easier to put the money into response and then later on into recovery rather than prevention or preparedness. And I think that's the problem India's suffered from, is no money went into prevention or preparedness. And now they're in the response area and they weren't prepared.
Right. Mr. Malik, India won't prepared for this situation. Now, as Professor Pitman mentioned already, that there is always a risk analysis which help the country how much they have to preserve, and then they have to balance that, okay, it become overhead and useless. So what do you think that does the situation which is happening because of the cylinder can be better if they prepared more cylinder in advance and nothing happened?
Absolutely, sir. India's health system is already overburdened and overworked.
Right.
So I don't think anything was done to expand it. They did not increase the capacity. I think when all said and done, there should be an audit run on health system and the performance of the government in terms of preparedness. And when that happens, they should go and prosecute everyone who was responsible and failed in their duties. It should be unforgivable. Because if I perform in my duty and when I don't, I get fired. I'm sure Professor Pitman, when he worked, he had to perform. And when he was not performing up to standards, he was reprimanded. And if there were serious consequences of his neglect, people get fired. He himself probably was boss for many people whom he did job reviews. Unfortunately, in our countries, there is no job review, especially of the politicians. This time they should have prepared. It was not something that struck them like lightning. They had seen it everywhere else. It had happened in US and we were laughing. Look, their numbers are going up. Our numbers, we don't care. Look how badly Italy is dealing with it. How well we are dealing. It was not that we are dealing well with it. It is just that we did not get struck. And when we got stuck, we came unglued quickly. If you report all the numbers, India's tragedy would be the biggest ever anywhere in the world.
Right. Mr. Pitman, Dr. Bernard mentioned a formula, and here the story started. That, okay, every third person from the system is involved for this disaster failure. And if something happened like that, do you think who is going to be accountable?
Look, Dr. Bernard raised a very good principle in democracy. And one of the principles in democracy is to review decisions. India certainly has had problems with their farmers, and now they've had problems with their COVID. In Australia or America, you would have a major review. And the review would identify the problems in the system, problems in the governance processes, problems in the how the functionality occurs, and then the Royal Commission or Commission of Inquiry would give a series of recommendations. And then the government would say, well, certainly they review it, but in majority of cases, they then go about implementing those recommendations. Here in Australia, we've had something like about 4 or 5 Royal Commissions in the last couple of years. Over the bushfires, major Royal Commission which showed systemic problems. They've just had one into mental health, which again shows systemic problems. They've just had another one into aged care, over the number of deaths and problems in aged care. And the government turned around in their budget a couple of weeks ago and said, we're going to put in several $1 billion to fix up the aged care, hundreds of millions of dollars to look at mental health, and they're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, possibly billions of dollars, to look at their failure in disaster management with the bushfires. And that holds governments accountable, and it lets the public know what the governments have done or failed to do. And the public and the media can then know with assurance that the government's going to fix the problem.
Right. Dr. Bernard Malik, we were discussing about the shortage of the cylinder, and I learned that there is some support is initiated from you or your system or your group friend circle to send the cylinders to India. Can you share some detail about these? Because these actions must be notified to the viewers and to the people that we have a very good people, we have a very good heart from the people from this world, and they are still looking after the people from the India.
Sir, I want to put it for the record. My giving generally is in secret. I don't display my giving a lot. That's not my nature.
Right.
In this case, what I have done is I put it on the Facebook to encourage others. It is supposed to have multiple benefits. One, people who are suffering should know that there are people that care for us.
Right. Good. Yeah.
Okay. Second, I want to encourage others to give because there is a genuine need. Poor people who have been under lockdown are helpless. They are not able to buy oxygen. They don't have money. Oxygen is like gold there. It's very, very expensive. I think last week, you would know, we did an interview of a gentleman from Bombay. He's known as Oxygen Man.
Right.
Sold his car, he sold his house, he's selling everything that he owns.
Right.
He sees the need is great.
Right.
Mr. Satinder Chinu, who was the host for the program, came out, we discussed, and I said, I think we should do whatever it takes to support him. For that, I met with the board, TV Asia board, American College board, and we decided to contribute a little bit as a group.
Right.
Then I also discussed with the Professor Pitman that we should do it. So what we have done is, in the first phase, we have contributed refilling of 1,000 oxygen cylinders. The money transferred today, hopefully either he has received it or he'll receive it. And we stand committed to saving more lives. I work on the principle of Mother Teresa, give until it hurts. And we would continue to support our people in need. I also want to put it for the record that we started doing this right when we started in 2011. When there were Queensland floods, we gave, as a new college, we didn't have much, we gave out. Then as late as when Australian fires happened, if you remember bushfires happened, again. So we stand committed. It's not that what we give is lot. It should show that we share their grief and suffering.
Right. Mr. Malik, do you encourage if somebody likes to also support and be a part of this help stream? Do you still how they can contact and what is the method? What is the process?
We have started, I started a personal initiative under American College and my group of colleges that I have. Each one save one.
Each one save one.
That's right. That is that everyone should adopt one poor patient there.
Right.
We're happy to pass on their names, whoever wants to come out and help. It's very, very critical that we rise above our own self. We get out and help these people because there is no one to help them.
Right. Each one save one. Dr. Bernard Malik, thank you. And Professor Pitman, let me bring them to the hot seat. And then hot topic for the day is conflict between Palestine and Israel. Dr. Bernard Malik and Professor Pitman, there is a story behind it. This is East India Company. They've been in India. And in 1947, they decided to keep two nations separated and make a two country, one called Pakistan and one called India. But since 1947, the both country never settles, always having the issue. Second thing that happened on 1948, similar decision has been made between two states. One is called Palestine and the other one called Israel. And since 1948, both countries never have a peace. Yes, there are some good days or there are something. First question is, do you think there was a fabricated issue between these two decisions, 1947 and 1948, because the result is the same? Does it was a predefined plan that, okay, let's make this decision and let these people to fight all the time in their life? Professor Pitman.
One of the sad events in life is probably more blood has been spilt around Jerusalem than any other place on the earth, and it's been going on for centuries. And I was sad to hear how many people had died over the split between Pakistan and India. And I think the record indicates about 14 million people were displaced, the largest number in human history. So it hasn't had a very good success rate in either countries, and certainly in Palestine and Israel, and to a degree Pakistan and India, religion has been an issue, but it's sad to see that mostly everyone's related. In Israel, the Jews and the Arabs, they're cousins. And I'm assuming in India and Pakistan, you're all cousins too. So technically, you all come from the same root of the tree. And it's sad to watch that the families, the extended families, if I can refer to that, still don't get on with each other even to this day. And what the solution is, I don't know.
Mr. Malik, Professor Pitman don't know the solution. Do you think the concept or the theory I just shared, that it was a planned decision, or no, it was not a planned decision, it was a good decision? 47, they made Pakistan and India. In 48, they try to make two different states, two countries, they can live decently. However, from as he says, that we are cousins, so we don't accept each other. So do you think that the decision was wrong, or there is something difficult, different especially in Palestine and Israel issue? I'm not here to talk about India and Pakistan. You are from India, I'm from Pakistan, and we are living like a family. So I think that is sorted out.
Oh, okay. So I was going to say about India and Pakistan first, but I think a lot of politics got played that time. But
right.
Luckily, I think now we are learning to live like brothers. And we do live very well out of India and Pakistan. We have some issues there because some politics gets played. Having said that, yes, Israel and Palestine is an abiding conflict. What happens is every now and then somebody wants to become a hero.
Right.
You understand there are same compulsions that we have back home in India and Pakistan. They have same compulsions in Israel and Palestine.
Right.
Right? If you remember Camp David agreement that happened between Prime Minister Isaac Rabin and PLO chairman Yasser Arafat.
Yeah.
Yasser Arafat gave a letter in writing to say that we recognize Israel's right to exist. And Israel said, we recognize your right to a statehood, and then let's go forward. They both were given Nobel Prize, but you know what happened. Prime Minister Isaac Rabin was assassinated. So that should give you a real good factor about what happens in these countries because of politics. There'll be some people that would hate what you do. Same thing is happening today with Hamas. Hamas is one of those that needs attention. Israeli Prime Minister is under investigation. Netanyahu, very strong leader.
Yes.
Personally, I feel at times that, finish both the countries, because there are more Jews that live in Queens than they live in Israel. Whatever is left in Israel, bring it. But, it's a right to their land. It's a biblical land they have. Palestine also have the right to the land. As long as you keep talking about the right to the land, more people will be dead, more bloodshed will happen. I think somewhere good people of goodwill need to come together and reach a decision where somebody sitting in a very posh house or posh office is not pushing helpless people on the street to be killed. And somebody is not ordering, go and blow up that place and kill. And somebody is not throwing rockets out there on people of Israel.
So it's a new theory, and I think it's an interesting concept. Professor Pitman, Dr. Bernard mentioned a good concept, and it's happening, especially in the country where we live. It always happened that we would like to hide something, so we started creating something else. So people has to forget or avoid looking from these things or talking about that issue, and they started something differently. As we already discussed, I think in our 5 or 6 weeks before that, Mr. Netanyahu is going to be under the trial because of some corruption issues and supporting some media channels and media people, and that was one of the possibility. And then second thing, he says that Hamas would like to show also there. But again, if these things are started just to avoid then the people interest to look at something else. Mr. Pitman, do you think it's a wise risky decision, because a lot of people died, even including the Jazeera channels or media channels, buildings has been destroyed completely. Do you think it's a good move? Professor Pitman, are you with me?
Look, politics quite often overrides the goodwill of people for the sake of quite often their own self-advantages, sometimes for corrupt purposes, and that can include money. Corruption can be actually changing values and direction as well. So one of the dilemmas that faces Israel and Palestine is that there are hidden agendas, and those agendas are driven by people who want to take advantage of it in terms of political gains. And the issue is quite often driven by corrupt reasonings over things historically, things in the present. But as Winston Churchill said during World War II in the House of Commons, that if you keep going back into the past and try to live it in the present, you'll never move on into the future. And I think that's the difficulty, is that they're still looking at the past. rather than into the future. And quite often the expression about when one door closes, another opens, Thomas Edison, who coined the phrase, said, too many people keep looking at the closed door. And certainly there were decisions made by the British government, both in India and Pakistan and in Israel and Palestine, which weren't favouring everybody. But you can't live on what's gone on in the past. You got to look to the future. And I think that's part of the problem, is that they're trying to blame history for their problem rather than working it out and working on the future.
Dr. Bernard Malik, now when it's coming back to the power game, and you also mentioned that Yasser Arafat, he got the Nobel Prize, and then Israel Prime Minister also got the Nobel Prize. And in past history also shows that there are many attempts has been made. Various times they came back to the peace talks, problem resolved. Look at that. What I'm trying to say, look at the question. The people are same there. They are fighting. Then they go to the peace. Nobody changed. It's still the same people. They live for years, for few years, and then they start fighting again. So what exactly happened? Is something coming from outside, and then it's going to agitate the issues there. Otherwise, the same people are there. Okay, they start fighting, but fighting was finished, and they go for a peace.
You know, somehow I find this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the whole culture in Middle East is very tribal culture. Fight this, fight that. You tell me which Middle Eastern country, one is democratic, second is peaceful. Jordan became peaceful after they struck a friendship treaty with Israel. Egypt became peaceful after they struck treaty with Israel. I think that's what should be done in Palestine too. Just go ahead and become friends and then live your life well. But unlike Jordan and unlike Egypt, you don't have one ruler in Palestine. Palestine's official president is different, and in Gaza, I'm sure you understand the situation there. There, Gaza and West Bank. West Bank is peaceful. We have trouble in Gaza because Gaza is currently ruled or technically managed by Hamas. So who should Israel negotiate with? Should they negotiate with the president of Palestinian Authority or Hamas? They negotiated with the president of Palestinian Authority. That is why Yasser Arafat became president of Palestine. But then Hamas won the elections and they wanted their own piece of flesh. So until they can have one government that is able to make decisions on behalf of their people, this will continue. It doesn't matter whether it is Israel or America or Pakistan or India, whosoever they're dealing with, this would continue. Unfortunately, it is toll of human lives. And people just get carried away. I see a lot of Facebook posts saying, oh, this is not anti-Semitic, but I'm here to support Palestine. It's fine. Support Palestine, support Israel, whatever you support, it's not going to do anything there. The world has been looking after Palestine for years. There is nothing. The highest unemployment in any country is Palestine. People can't find job. So they live off the goodwill of the West. All these Western countries pour in tons of money there, right? All that money goes to help Gaza. Hamas uses it to buy weapons. So somewhere, somebody needs to take a step back and say, no, let's think about the little children getting killed. Let's think about the young men that are getting killed. They've been radicalized. Somebody needs to go and first create employment. I remember we had a big term of terrorism in India, especially Punjab.
Right.
And the Director General of Police was Mr. J.F. Ribeiro. He used to come to our seminary. I was studying for priesthood that time. And he said something which at that time we didn't understand, but now we understood. He said, if I can generate employment here, he said, I can finish terrorism. He said terrorism never finishes anywhere in the world, but he said I can finish it to a level where it is manageable.
Right.
This is what needs to happen in Palestine. They need to generate opportunities of employment for these young people. They need to have more schools there. They need to have more universities there so the people can study there and get out and find jobs all over Middle East. Unfortunately, Middle East is very big about making noise when it comes to Palestine and some of the Muslim issues. But when it comes to hardship, none of them takes any pains. Think what happened. All these people who were persecuted but had suffered walked over to Europe 3-4 years ago. Do you remember? Millions of people walked over to Europe, but Saudi Arab that finances all these big mosques and gives money did nothing to help these people. And so the whole Middle East stayed quiet. You just can't be talking on an issue and not help. So they need to come out and say, okay, you're my brother. We share the same faith. Let's get out and help. Any given day, West, that is, when I say West means Western countries that are not Muslims, pour in more money for the sustenance of Gaza and West Bank than Muslim countries do.
It's a bit of truth. Professor Pitman, Mr. Malik, he really discussed very sensitive and very detailed reasons. Now, coming back to you, he says already that there are, first of all, he mentioned about the concept of we operate like a tribe, still tribes, and then the money which is poured by them from the West, it is still more than the money coming from their own country. That's really true. Now, coming back, the small country, both small states, Palestine and Israel, are surrounded by Arab countries, and nothing is happening from the peace perspective from the country those are living together. What do you think? What is the reason behind that? People are not interested to solve this problem, and they will get also some benefit for this issue. I'm talking about the surroundings, country and they are from Arabs.
I think some credit should go to someone like Donald Trump, who tried to talk to the Arab nations about being more supportive of the peace process there.
Yeah.
And he actually endorsed what Dr. Bernard had suggested, that they should be helping their brothers financially. And several of the Arab countries, particularly the wealthier oil ones, said that they would put more money into somewhere like Palestine. So I think the issue is Palestine probably has a reputation. Certainly, if you ever study terrorism, modern terrorism, the theorists or those who talk about the theories of terrorism have it emanating out of Palestine.
Right.
So there's a bit of a brand about terrorism in Palestine. Not so much Palestine in its own right, but global terrorism. So there's a little bit of branding going on, I think, with Palestine and the other Arab nations who are trying to step away from it. I think another issue that's important over there is the Arab countries, I think, sometimes want to get involved where they can see it has a political benefit, but will step away on other occasions, particularly when it's dealing with the larger countries like Russia and America and Germany and France. When you're dealing with those countries that were part of your existence for hundreds of years, then and they're also the major source of economic benefit to you, even though it's oil, you've still got to get someone to buy it. They are reluctant to take sides because they don't want to offend the countries that provide them with huge economic benefits.
Right. Mr. Malik, the last question. We know that the problem is, look at the ground realities. There was a Ramadan period, people are praying, the mosque was full, and suddenly the riots are started. Suddenly, there was not, I'm still trying to understand exactly what happened. Because when mosque is full, it means that they've been allowed to offer the prayer. It's not like they jump in the mosque. They will, they are offering the prayer. Something happens, which started and then getting worse and worse by any day. What do you think? And in past also it happened. That it goes up, then come down, then peace process started. Everything. What do you think that what's going to be happening next week? Does you are expecting that someone from the superpower will jump in and will resolve it and will go for a peace and settle down this, and then who will be responsible for 200, 300 died from the both sides in total?
First of all, to begin with, I think what is happening is very sad. Whether Palestine initiated it or Israel is initiated it. When you have more power, also comes more responsibility. So Israel has to practice restraint, no matter what it is. They just can't go and blow up these buildings and think there is nobody in the building. People are getting killed. These are human lives. I don't care what the issue is. There are other ways. If in 21st century we still have to settle our disputes by blowing up buildings, then I'm sorry, there is no difference between if you call Hamas as terrorist or you call Israel as a terrorist. That's number one. This was expected. It happened with 3 months too late. If you see last 4 years, nothing happened because Trump was there. They knew you piss off this guy, you will get in trouble. Biden, though, is a gentleman, is considered a weak world leader. Trump was a very, very strong world leader. You see, as soon as Trump changed, there was trouble in Myanmar. See, the popular government was not allowed to sworn in. Military junta came and they took over. Middle East was expected. I was talking to my son, Christopher. He's only 15. He was telling me, Daddy, see, the trouble will start brewing up in Middle East. He said, ISIS will come up. Conflict between Israel and Palestine will come up. Things will start in Syria again. So you need a strong world leader who means business, sometimes to keep peace. I think we should end this program on this note that bloodshed is not acceptable, no matter for what reason it is. Human life, whether it is a Muslim or Jew or Christian or Indian or Pakistani or Israeli or whichever country it is valuable. And we can't accord that value to human life today. I think, as I said, we're still living in tribal culture. And that was the reason why I mentioned it. When I say Middle East, you please include Israel in that. That's a tribal culture.
Right.
That's me, I'll come and kill you. And I remember the numbers used to be, for every one Israel kill, they'll go and kill 10 Palestinians. How fair is that for a big superpower?
Yes, Malik Sahab, thank you very much. Malik Sahab, can we have a small prayer from you for finishing of this conflict? You are a good pastor also. I'll do the prayer also.
Yes, yeah, sure. Father, we come together here as children of one God, that we praise you, we bless you, and we thank you. Father, we pray for peace in Israel. Father, Israel is your favorite nation. Israel is biblical land. We pray for peace in Israel and Palestine. Father, it's not Jews who are your people alone. People of Palestine are also your children. People living in India suffering through this COVID are all your children. People having issues and troubles all over the world are your children. Though we all claim to have our own gods, but at the end of the day, you are supreme God. Father, we pray for peace. We request your intervention so that everything settles. Father, give patience to everyone. Give wisdom that they make right decisions, that the world powers and the higher authorities would intervene and bring peace. We make this prayer through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. Amen. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. Absolutely, our wish that God bless on these nations. They are really struggling, suffering, and we believe, inshallah, that within the next week, everything will be sorted out, especially the conflict between Palestine and Israel will be resolved. and either involved by some magical men from this called superpower or the prayer which we done today. Ultimately, we believe that God is listening and He is helping. He is always helping, especially when it's going to be difficult and worse for many people. Similar for India also, the COVID situation is getting worse, and we believe, inshallah, very soon that India's situation is going to be better. And next week we are going to discuss about the improvement in the COVID side. I hope this week talk was again, as we say, that sometimes we have a very difficult and serious topics of the life which need to be discussed and need to be discussed naturally. Thank you, Dr. Bernard Malik. Thank you, Professor Pitman. And today we are closing the show on this note that next week will be much better than this week.
Amen.
Next week, it's a goodbye. Thank you very much. See you, sir, next week, next Monday.
Thank you.